So I've been training clients with high intensity training techniques for over 30 years, but something happened. And when it happened, it was extremely important that I stopped everything and made sure I did this video so you would know exactly what you need to avoid in case you're doing any form of naturally intense high intensity training or any high intensity training protocols, because it's extremely important to understand that it could land you in the hospital.
What?
That's right, you could be hospitalized. And I hope this video serves kind of like a public safety announcement, because I'm all about the idea that to whom much is given, much is expected. And I want to make sure anyone doing this kind of training stays safe. And the second I saw one of my clients end up in danger because of this form of training, it was very, very important to find out exactly why
and how to prevent it, as it's extremely rare.
Because I've trained over 1,200 people over the past 33 years, and this never happened before. What is it? Stay tuned. We're going to talk all about exactly what you need to know if you're doing any kind of high intensity training, whether you're an advanced high intensity trainer or a beginner, because it could happen to anyone. So, no beating around the bush. What I'm talking about is rhabdomyolysis. And rhabdomyolysis is
A dangerous condition.
and it's the reason why if anyone ever has any of the symptoms
After a high intensity workout, or any workout for that matter. And those symptoms include dark urine in conjunction with muscle stiffness, really swollen muscles and tender muscles and muscle weakness, and a decrease in the overall urine output.
you need to stop everything and go to the ER. I do not think it's something you can deal with on your own, because
It can lead to kidney failure.
So, rhabdomyolysis, what is it? Rhabdomyolysis, or rhabdo as some people call it, is thankfully mercifully rare. And here's how it works. When you're working out, you are essentially breaking down muscle fibers. In fact, breaking down muscle fibers is what makes muscles get bigger and stronger if whatever caused the breakdown was unaccustomed as part of the adaptation process. However, if it gets to a point where it's completely overloaded, some of the toxic components of those muscle fibers can leak into your blood with high amounts of potassium, phosphate, myoglobin, creatine kinase, and urate. Now, your kidneys are responsible for removing all these components from your blood, but when it gets to a point where your kidney can't filter it, it can cause complete kidney failure. As such, it's very, very important that we understand the mechanisms of it and understand as well what to do to avoid it if you're doing any form of high energy training. So, to summarize what happened, one of my clients, who I've been training off and on now for about the past 10 years, took about a 2-year layoff and came back to train with us. She came back to train with us, and we did a pretty easy leg workout, more or less an introductory leg workout, because whenever we start with anyone with this form of high intensity training, we always start slow and build the intensity. However, several days after the workout, she felt far more sore in her legs after a leg workout than she normally did. Now, bear in mind, she had been training with me for several years before, so she kind of had an idea so what kind of delayed onset muscle soreness to expect after a high intensity workout. And this didn't quite feel like normal post-exercise soreness. Plus the fact her legs felt a little bit on the swollen side. Then it got worse. Her urine started to get a little bit on the darker side, at which point it's an indication of rhabdomyolysis. Now, in this particular case, she was lucky. It was a very, very mild case. It didn't require hospitalization, and she was able to recover with no adverse effects whatsoever, and she's training just as hard as she ever was before. But the thing is, this is the first person training directly with us over the past 33 years. And like I said, I've trained personally at this point when I checked it out, over 1,200 people, and it never happened. We've had, over the past 3 decades, 2 other instances of people experiencing rhabdomyolysis.
And I think it's really important to go over those cases and to give you some insight as to exactly what not to do. Because in both cases,
They had to be hospitalized. But they were not exactly clients of ours, and the circumstances behind their being hospitalized were very different. And when that happened, that was a shock as well. The first person who ever had any kind of rhabdomyolysis training with naturally intense high intensity training was someone who came in for a trial session. They did, again, a leg workout. And after their first high intensity leg workout, which they really loved with one of my trainers, they went for a run afterwards. Then the next morning when they woke up, they loved the workout so much that they decided to do the whole workout again. When they did that, afterwards, their legs got swollen, they started seeing dark and discolored urine, and they ended up in the hospital for several days afterwards for observation. Thankfully, he was okay afterwards, but he went again all of our guidelines, which say that if you do any kind of high intensity training, you should not train that muscle group for at least 6 to 7 days afterward. We also don't generally recommend that you go for a run after a high intensity leg workout, but people have done it in the past and they've all been fine.
But doing 2 of our leg workouts in a row is a recipe for disaster.
But bear in mind, this happened from someone who was not following naturally intense high intensity training protocols and was going against our advice. And then it happened again. Now, the first time this happened, I've been training clients for about 25 years and never saw it happen because I've never met anybody who did a high intensity leg workout for the first time and thought it was a good idea to go for a run afterward and then do it again.
And we were pretty sure it was a one-off, but unfortunately it wasn't.
But strangely enough, our senior personal trainer, Erica, trained a client for his first trial session, and he did exactly the same thing. He went for a run the next morning after his first high intensity training workout, which apparently he loved. And again, he loved it so much that he did it again. He did 2 high intensity leg workouts 2 days in a row and ended up, again, leg swelling, darkened urine, symptoms of rhabdomyolysis, ended up being hospitalized and stayed in the hospital for observation for several days. 2 cases of people not following protocols that we would put forward for naturally intense high intensity training. But then this happening with my regular client was extremely strange because she was following all the protocols. She didn't go for a run afterwards, and she did not do a leg workout right afterward either. And she was someone who actually had done naturally intense high intensity training before. It wasn't her first rodeo. And what I found was very interesting, looking at the cases of those 2 men who had rhabdomyolysis and my 1 client who had rhabdomyolysis, is the fact that all 3 incidences happened in summer at times when there were extremely high temperatures. And I know for a fact, based on my client's feedback, that she did something different that she doesn't normally do before and after a high intensity workout that could have contributed to this happening. And that's the fact that she was not consuming enough fluids. She was, as she said, not drinking much water at all and much fluid at all before the workout, and strangely enough, after the workout. And also that particular week, the temperatures had just started to get on the high side over here in the northeastern USA. And after speaking with 2 physicians about this particular case, they both came back saying that, of course, they didn't actually meet the client and it's not exactly medical advice, but they both do high intensity training, and their feedback was the same, that it could have been the fact that she was dehydrated at the point in time when she was doing this particular form of training. So even though it was a reduced high intensity workout, this was nowhere near as intense as what her regular leg workouts would look like since she was just starting off after a 2-year layoff. It was still just enough that perhaps, in addition to the fact that the temperatures are on the hot side, could have led to her developing rhabdomyolysis.
So hydration is key if you're doing any kind of high intensity training.
It is so very important. In fact, the last video I did with my good friend, Mr. America, John Hart, we touched a little bit about the importance of hydration. But this video should probably drive home as well the fact that it is so important that I consume 1 gallon to 1.5 gallons of water every single day and have done so for decades.
And for optimal performance with this type of training, I recommend you have no less than 8 glasses of water the day before and after your high intensity workouts.
And my trainers and I always talk about the importance of hydration when you're training, because when you're not properly hydrated, we the trainers can always see it in performance of our clients. And if you've ever done any kind of high intensity training with a radical drop in your overall water intake, you would have seen a difference as well. So
rhabdomyolysis, thankfully, is very rare. But if you're just starting off with high intensity training or just coming back after a long layoff and you're doing a leg workout especially, make sure you have enough fluids in your system before you work out and after you work out. Do not go for a run, especially if it's a hot day, right afterwards. And extremely importantly, never, under any circumstances, should you ever do the same workout back to back with this form of high intensity training, as it could cause rhabdomyolysis. Now, very important, for more information about training splits and how you should break your workouts up, make sure you watch this video over here. So thanks so much for tuning in. Know that I believe in you, and as always, Excelsior.